WickBot is a anti-nuke and auto moderation bot that's just really good. But the only con about it is that it's pretty difficult to set up and it's kind of confusing. So today I'm going to show you how to set it up and how to make it function correctly for your server. So to start off, the main thing that we actually need to do is first invite the bot. So there's going to be a link in the description. Just click on it, then click add to server. Then you just need to add it to your server, click continue, and make sure it has administrator. Then click authorize, then click I am human if you need to. And now the bot should join your server. Now it's going to tell you all this blah, 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 blah garbage that you need to do. I'm just going to show you how to do it because who likes to read anyways? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to look at the DM we get from Wick. And when you open it up, it'll basically say, hey, thank you for choosing Wick, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to tell you to scan this QR code with Google Authenticator. Now, I highly suggest you doing this because what this does is give you two-factor authentication. So if your server does get nuked or someone hacks into your account or something bad happens, then you will have another kind of barrier to prevent people from gaining access to Wick. So set this up, it's pretty easy, it tells you how to do it, just scan it with Google Authenticator, then you'll have a two-factor authentication code. Regardless, I'm going to skip that and just continue on with actually setting it up in your server. Going back to our server, we need to go to the top left, we need to click on server settings, we need to go to roles, and Wick is going to be at the very bottom. You just want to drag it up to the very top. You need Wick to be on top of all your other roles. Then what you need to do is you need to go into your admin or moderator roles. If you have these, then you need to go through them because we need to disable a couple things. If you don't have an admin or moderator role, just make blank roles. Regardless, if you already have these roles, you need to go into edit, then you need to go to permissions, and you need to make sure that you do not give them the kick or ban permission. And the reason why is because Wick will automatically allow your admins to kick and ban, but it'll monitor those kick and bans. Once those are turned off, then we're good to keep on going. Now, once that's all out of the way, let's go back to that DM we got from Wick and click on the dashboard link. Then click yep, and that will take us to the dashboard for our server. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to click proceed, and we're now going to set up the bot. Now, in the chapters or the timestamps, I'm going to have each section of the bot. If you want to go ahead and just go through it and kind of explore it on your own, go for it, but make sure to come back to the end because we need to run a command to make sure that Wick works properly and we need to adjust a couple of things. So to start off, we have the statics section and we're going to go into the roles part of it and we need to set up a couple of roles. Now this mute role and quarantine role, you don't have to worry about it right now because like I said before, we're going to run a command at the very end of setting everything up and that will automatically assign everything. But in admin roles, we need to give our admin role. And if you're ever confused on what's going on, feel free to just click on this little drop down here and it's going to tell you what each section does. It's also going to tell you like, hey, you need to look at this, you need to look at that. For moderator roles, we need to add our moderator. And finally, we have main roles. Now, main roles are basically roles that anyone can get on your server that aren't like staff roles. So in this case, we have level 5, 10, 25, and 50, and I'm going to add every single one of those. Now, what this main roles section actually does is just monitor these roles to make sure no weird changes happen to them. Then click save. And once you save these roles, click on dashboard, then it will bring you to your server select screen. In this case, I have 2 servers with Wick on it. I'm going to click on the name of the server that I'm trying to configure, and that will bring me to the overview once again. And then we can move on to the second section of statics. Now, I highly recommend you just opening these in new tabs. So press down your middle mouse button, it'll open in a new tab and we can switch back and forth. We don't have to go through that kind of painful menu. So in the static channels section, the logging channel and the mod log channel, just leave those blank because Wick will automatically fix them and set them for you. But partnership channels are basically channels where people can self-advertise if you want. It basically prevents people from being muted for having like an advertisement. Then for main channel, you want to add all of your main channels. So in this case, the general channel is definitely the channel you want to add. But if you have anything else like chit chat or like coding channels, just add channels where people talk a lot in. So in this case, obviously the general channel. Now there's this verifications channel thing and we're just going to skip it, click save. Then once it saves, we can close off this tab and we're back at the main menu. And finally, let's go to the users tab. Now the users tab it really isn't important, but if you have extra owners, you can add them. So you need to search for their member and find them. And same thing with trusted admins. Now there are warnings for these specific roles if you open it up. Basically, a trusted admin and an extra owner have very strong permissions, so do not give these to random people. These are only given to people you can trust with your whole server. So trusted admins can basically do whatever they want, but they can't configure Wick, whereas extra owners can do anything they want, and they can also configure Wick. Now going back to the dashboard, we are on the whitelist section. Now there's 5 different types of whitelists that we can do. If I middle mouse click on the spam whitelist and open it up in a new tab, you'll notice that we can actually whitelist members, roles, channels, categories, and webhooks. If you whitelist someone from spam, it basically means that they don't get caught up in the spam filter. So if I go to roles, for example, and give admin and moderator spam whitelist, they can spam and they won't get punished for it. Now you can also do this for like level 50 people as a reward if you want, and you can pick specific channels if you want. Once again, categories and webhooks. Webhooks are basically, it's a can of worms that if you understand what it is, then you can configure them here. In this case, I'm just going to skip over it. Click save, and then I am going to close this tab. And now we have basically the same thing for pings and mentions. It's exactly the same setup, so I'm not going to show you me adding in everything again, but I will tell you which each one does. So spam is pretty obvious, spamming, just typing a whole bunch of messages. Pings and mentions, you can prevent people from being muted or kicked or warned for spamming pings. Invite links, so if you have like advertisers that you have a role for, you can give them that. Then there's this quarantine whitelist, and you might be thinking, what's quarantine? And quarantine is Wick's kind of bread and butter. This is the main big feature of Wick. Basically, if someone does anything suspicious, like changing roles so that everyone can have admin permissions, or perhaps some bot that joins your server that's trying to ban everyone, or even some random user that joins your server and they're trying to raid, they'll be given a quarantine role where they basically can't do anything. And the final feature of quarantine is that, let's just think of a scenario. Your admin adds a bot that's trying to nuke your server, and the admin notices that, oh, the bot got caught up in quarantine, and they're trying to remove it from quarantine so they can nuke your server. Well, Wick is going to pick up on that, and anyone that tries to modify people that are stuck in quarantine will also join quarantine. So it's kind of like a domino effect. That's exactly what they say in their documents. But regardless, this makes it so that people who are trying to cause issues will get put into quarantine. Now, if you're getting any false positives, you can add specific members only to this whitelist, but Wick does give you a massive warning that this is very dangerous. So I would highly suggest you skipping past it, but if worst comes to worst, then you might have to whitelist a specific member. Once again, try not to do this because it's dangerous. And then we have the everyone whitelist, and this is basically just allowing people to ping everyone and those main public roles I was talking about. So remember the level 5, the level 10, the level 15. We want to make it so that admins can actually ping people. So I'm going to click on roles whitelisted, add the admin, and let's say you trust your moderators. You can give moderators the ability to ping everyone, but if you don't want that, just leave them out and they won't have the ability to. In this case, I'm going to only give it to my admin and click save, and that is the whitelist section. Now, once again, this is very up to your own server and how you want to whitelist specific roles. Just keep in mind, try to be very conservative. Don't just give people a whole bunch of whitelist permissions because it could bite you in the rear end. Always make sure, before you do anything, if you see this red bomb, just click on the little drop down and give it a read so you understand what's going on. Now the next section is miscellaneous. This one's extremely straightforward. I'm just going to middle mouse click on it to open it up in a new tab, and you'll notice that if I expand all the categories, we have a couple options. We can change the prefix if we want, so that's basically how you call up the command for the bot. You can have compact outputs, so you can enable it if you want it to be smaller in terms of the chat. So like, oh, this might be too big. It'll compact it and make it look ugly. I just leave it off. For clean messages, you can make it so that if Wick sends a message, it will be deleted after a few seconds. So you can enable it if you want or keep it disabled. All up to you. There's warn settings. Now, basically, if someone gets warned by Wick, after a certain amount of warns, they'll get muted. So I just leave that on. Then next up, there's enforce Wick roles. Now this one is really straightforward. If someone tries to change the muted role so it's not actually a muted role anymore, then Wick will just change it back. You can keep this enabled or disabled, it's up to you. You might have bots that will try to overwrite the muted rule, and they'll switch back and forth and lag both of your bots. If Wick is your main bot, which it should be, then enable it. But if you have like Dino or something, you might want to keep this disabled. And finally, we have ignore permit 1. Now, basically this means that regular server members, if they call a command, you can make it so that Wick ignores them. I'd just enable that, because then you don't have to worry about people trying to use Wick randomly. And if you scroll down, you will see this moderation tab. Now, basically, just read through this. It's really straightforward. The main thing I want to look at is make Wick confirm the action I want to do. I personally like this disabled because if you call up a ban, you want to ban someone, it'll say, are you sure you want to ban them? I really don't like that, so I'm going to disable it. But if you want people to confirm that, like, are you sure you want to ban someone? Then keep it enabled. Now, if you scroll down some more, you'll notice that when using the ban command, you want to purge X amount of days worth of messages. Just leave this as 7. Now, if we scroll down some more, you'll see I want 0 minutes to be the default mute duration. Basically, if you leave this as 0, then there will be no default mute duration, and I would leave that just the way it is, because honestly, if your moderators can't add a mute duration, then they might be stupid. Then for our last 4 options, we have basically when someone uses a moderation command, Wick will DM the targeted person. So if you get banned, Wick will DM you. You can keep that enabled or disabled. It's up to you. Then on auto punishments, so if someone says like the N-word in chat or something, then Wick will display the reason as well in the message. Just leave that enabled. For the second last option, we have on all auto mod punishments, always purge messages. Now this basically means that if someone says the N-word, it's going to purge their messages for the last 7 days, I think. So I would just leave that off. It'll work regardless. Like if someone does say a bad word, it will delete that message, but it won't delete all their messages. And finally, there's always delete the moderation execution messages. This is basically if someone calls the command like ban, it'll delete that message once the ban has actually happened. Once again, it's preference up to you. You can keep it or delete it. Then once you have all the settings figured out, click save. And now let's move on to the next section of anti-nuke. Now, once again, this is Wick's bread and butter, and general settings is going to be very easy to set up. Middle mouse click it to open it in a new tab. And what you want to do is just enable everything. Keep in mind there's 2 VIP options like prune detection and this one here. So you obviously can't enable them unless you have premium or VIP. Just scroll down to the very bottom, enable this bad boy, and click save. You'll thank me later. It keeps it nice and tidy and very secure. And for the second part of anti-nuke, we have triggers and caps, and this is basically the parameters of the anti-nuking system. So I'm going to click expand all categories. And basically, the main thing you're going to be looking at in this section is just changing these values. If you don't really care too much, just leave these the way they are. But if you notice there are some false positives, like, oh, one of your staff members is trying to change up some stuff and they got into quarantine by accident, then you can change these values to be a little nicer. So in this case, if someone creates 5 rules under 1 minute, add them to quarantine, you can change it so like, oh, if they make 10 rules under 1 minute, then add them to quarantine. So it's just how you adjust the parameters of the anti-nuking system. In this case, if you have no idea what you're doing, just leave it the way it is, sweetheart. Next up, we have auto mod and we have general settings. I'm going to middle mouse click it to open it in a new tab. And now we have these settings here. Now skip over the first row because it's already set up and enabled for you. But now we have a custom heat. What is custom heat? Well, heat is basically the way that Wick determines how bad someone's acting. So if they send an invite link, then they'll get maximum heat or 100%. If you have premium, you can adjust these parameters. Honestly, the way that they are right now work perfectly fine. But we have this option down here of set the member's current heat to 0% after getting muted/silenced. If you want it so that once they're muted, then okay, it's all good. You don't have to worry about the heat system anymore and they get reset back to 0. You can enable this. But in all honesty, leave it disabled. It makes it way better because if someone spams and then they get muted, once they get unmuted and they continue spamming, they just get muted faster. So just keep it disabled, okay? It's kind of confusing, but just keep it disabled. Next up, we have this timed mute section. Now this is where we kind of enter all in our fancy dancy parameters. So leave the top option enabled. And in the second one, we have, I want Wick to strike 3 times to give the final cap strike punishment. This is basically like 3 strikes and you're out. You can increase the amount of chances before someone will get the full mute duration. In this case, leave it as 3. But for the initial strikes, you are going to give 1 minute is the mute duration. So if someone makes their heat reach 100%, they're going to be muted for 1 minute. You can increase this if you have a lot of members talking, maybe increase it to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. This is where you configure it. So you just enter in here 5 minutes. In this case, for the last strike, this is kind of like, okay, someone was spamming, then they got the 5-minute mute, they kept on spamming, they got the second 5-minute mute, and they kept on spamming, and at the third time, once again, this parameter up here, they are now going to get an 11-minute mute. So that's kind of like the last chance mute. You can increase this to be a lot bigger or a lot smaller, it's up to you. Once again, there's a little bit of information. Wick recommends these be longer than initial strikes. In this case, I'm going to set it to 15 minutes. Then there are 2 premium options down here. These are really cool, but once again, most of you aren't going to be paying for the service. I just understand. I know you guys won't be paying for it, so I'm going to skip over it. And finally, we have auto server lockdown. Now, enable this. I really don't care. Just keep it enabled. It is a beta feature, however, so just keep that in mind. Basically, what this is going to do is that if you have a whole bunch of bots that join your server and start pinging random people, Wick will actually lock down your server, which means that no one can talk except admins and moderators, if I recall correctly. So this prevents people from just getting spam pinged all the time. This happens a lot in servers. You'd be surprised. This happened in mine, a whole bunch of other people's, so just keep it enabled. Now I have a couple of settings. Have Wick lock down the server when 50 mentions made by non-whitelisted members have been made under a certain period of time. This is up to you. I personally think 50 mentions is a lot. I'm going to change it to 20. Now, once I have it to 20 mentions, we need to set the time frame. So in this case, if there are 20 mentions in 3 seconds, Wick will lock down the server. And I think that's a pretty good idea, and there's a little bit more information if you want. We recommend these to be short. It is a good idea. Once you have it configured, click Save, and now let's move on to the filter section of AutoMod. Now this is where you get to set all the bad words, so it's kind of the fun part. So to start, we have normal message. Now this is kind of the heat system I was talking about, and this is where we get a little more in depth. Every time someone sends a message, they get 15% heat. Now you might be thinking, that makes no sense. Why would I punish people for talking? This is actually to prevent people from spamming. So if people send a whole bunch of messages within, 2 seconds, then that heat, that 15% is going to add up to 100%. Now in this case, you can increase it or decrease it. So if people keep on getting, warned for spamming and they're not really spamming, then I would decrease this value. If you think people are spamming and they're not being warned for it, then increase the value. Now, if people are spamming, you can have the option for Wick to warn them. So once they reach 100%, you can have them warn, mute, kick, or ban. Do not do ban for this because it just makes no sense. If people spam, then they'll just get banned, but it could be a sensitive filter. Regardless, you can have it as warn or mute. I would leave this as warn because remember way back, we made it so that if you get 3 or 5 warns, you get muted. It's probably a good system to go with. In this case, I'm going to set it to warn. And the second option under here doesn't actually work if you have it set to warn. It only works if you have mute. So I'm going to focus on that in the similar message section. Now in the similar message section, if someone's just spamming like fard over and over again, then it's going to add 22% to their heat percentage. So as you can see, we went from 15 to 22. People are going to get muted faster. In this case, I want Wick to mute people who are just spamming. Now we have this additional parameter here. For a message to be considered similar, it needs to be a certain percentage similar to a previous message. So in this case, 0.8 is 80%. So if the message is about 80% similar compared to the last one, then it'll be considered a similar message. And finally, remember that little mute thing I was talking about? It's down here. If the action is set to mute, it is set to mute, then we can set the duration of the mute. I want this to be, if they're spamming, I want it to be a good 5-minute mute, so they can just time out and calm down. Click Save. Now, Wick has their weird little algorithms thing that determine if an account is suspicious. If you have this option enabled, if someone is suspicious, every message they send will have an additional 7% heat added to it. So instead of it being the 15% here, it's going to be 15 plus 7, which is 22%, I hope. In this case, if the suspicious person keeps on sending messages, then Wick will automatically mute them, and you can increase the duration of this mute. You might want to mute them for instead of 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Once again, it's subjective and up to you. And if you're ever confused about anything, click on the little drop down and it'll tell you. We recommend these to be short. 10 minutes is short enough for me. Next up, we have invite links. Now, basically, if you have this enabled, people can't send invite links. Once again, remember that invite link whitelist that we had at the very start. This will override this setting here. So if you have, advertiser role whitelisted for invite links, this won't apply to them. That's the reason for the whitelist. But in this case, I'm going to make sure that invite links is enabled, which means that if someone sends an invite link, they're going to get 100% heat and they're going to be muted. And in this case, I want to mute them for, I don't know, they self-advertised for 20 minutes to encourage them to leave. I'm going to click save, and that's invite links. Now, the way that this NSFW filter works is that if your channel is not set to NSFW, so if I right-click edit channel, you can enable it as an NSFW channel. If it's not an NSFW channel and someone sends something that's not safe for work, then they will get automatically muted, which is the 100% thing. You can set the duration down here. Moving on, we have malicious websites. It's the same thing. It's self-explanatory. Emojis, same thing. Message characters. This one is just the amount of characters. So if someone is just spamming random stuff, then this will add to it. You can change the values. New lines. This is basically if someone goes into Discord and they're just spamming this a whole bunch. Oh, that didn't work. There we go. If someone spams a whole bunch of new lines like this, then you can make it so that they get muted, but you do have to enable this option. Once again, same thing, 5% for each new line. Then you have the, whatever action is going to be performed. I'm going to close that. There's Zalgo text, which is basically this weird little text. Once again, you can enable it or keep it disabled, up to you. Inactive channel, you can read through it. It's a VIP feature. None of you are going to use it because I know we're all broke. Now, mentions is kind of confusing. That's why I'm going over it. And the main thing is that the first option is that if someone isn't on the everyone in here whitelist, then they will be instantly punished. The 100% heat will be added to them. Pro secret. This is actually really good for those fake link spots like, oh, at everyone, here's free nitro. This will instantly mute them, which is great. And then you could have another bot that will instantly ban them. But I would just leave this at 100%. Then we have for every unique at user mention and ping, 15% is going to be added to the total heat. So in this case, you can set the parameters, just read through it. It's just going to make sure that people don't spam ping. Now you might have some cheeky breeky lads who will ping kind of throughout time. So they'll like ping 5 people, then do nothing, and then ping 5 people again and do nothing for a little bit. If they reach 20 mentions under an hour, they'll be instantly punished. And then it's the same settings where you can mute for a certain amount of time or kick or ban. All up to you, sweetheart. I'm going to close that. And let's move on to attachments. Look at this laundry list of items. So attachments basically adds heat if people add images, files, have a link or a sticker. It's basically just different parameters that you can set. It's really self-explanatory. This is actually a really easy part to set up. And once again, we have the same mute duration and normal stuff. And finally, we have the best part, which is the words blacklist. First off, keep this enabled. So turn it on, make sure it's on, then we go from there. So you have the little percentage that you can change. If you have this under 100%, then you can make it so that Wick will warn them or mute them or kick or ban them. All up to you. And this is where things need some explanation. So we have the pre-made list of profane words. So these are words that I won't say on YouTube because YouTube will probably get mad at me. But this is good for like very clean and family-friendly servers. So it includes the R word and even this word here. So you can enable that if you want. But if you're a little more of an adult server, then you can use Wick's pre-made list of vulgar words. So this would be like no cursing. So the F-bomb, the S word, the B word, all this other stuff, you can have that enabled. If you're more of an adult server and you don't mind saying some weird words like, F, then keep it off. That's really cringy. Then we have the final one. Use Wick's pre-made list of racist words. Enable that, okay? And for this bottom section here, we have our custom blacklists. Now, we have strict words and wildcard words. Strict words are basically words that people have to spell out exactly. So if I put in banana here and press enter, I now have banana as a whitelisted word. So if someone types in banana perfectly, then they will get muted. In this case, I'm going to add a wildcard word. Let's say I don't want people to say strawberry or blueberry or raspberry. I can try and put, strawberry and all this other stuff in here. Or what I can do is add berry in here. So now if someone says strawberry, they'll get muted for it. If someone says raspberry, they'll get muted for it. So it's just basically wildcard is like the section of the word. If this made no sense, Wick explains it here with the word hello. And finally, we have the basic action. So if someone says a bad word, you want them to be muted, maybe for like 5 minutes or 2 minutes. It's all up to you. Then you can click save and your changes will be applied. Now, next up is join gate. All you need to do is middle mouse click configure and it'll open it in a new tab. And basically we have status, make sure it's enabled. Then we have DM members. Now, DM members is basically going to tell someone if they got caught up in the join gate. If you have a lot of people rating you or you feel like you're a high risk target, disable this. If you're a new server and you don't have a lot of people that hate you, then you can leave it enabled. It's up to you. Then we have no avatar filter. Now, for me, this is actually pretty problematic because I make Discord tutorials. I might have people who don't know how to use Discord join my Discord server, and they might not have a profile picture set. So I need to keep this disabled. But if you have a lot of bots that are joining your server that don't have a profile picture, you can actually enable this option, and Wick will basically kick, or whatever action you have set here, every single account that joins without a custom profile picture. So all those weird default picture people will get kicked, and everyone with a profile picture will stay. That's up to you. I am going to keep it disabled. Just keep in mind that if you have a lot of new people joining your server, this can be problematic. Now, next up is this bot addition filter, and basically if you have it turned on, any bot that joins your server, so let's say you invite Dino or something, they will actually get kicked by Wick. Now, this is great if you have, admins that are trying to add bots that you really don't want them to add. It basically prevents them from changing up the server. You can have it enabled or disabled, it's up to you. Wick suggests that you leave it enabled, so I would just turn it on, to be honest. Next up, we have suspicious account filter. And this can make it so that if people have a quote-unquote suspicious account, they could be kicked, or they can be muted, or they could be banned. If you go into the advice section here, it does tell you that try not to make it like instantly ban someone who's suspicious because you can have false positives. If I were you, I would enable this, then change I want Wick to mute suspicious accounts joining. Just keep in mind that it'll mute them, and that means that you'll have to go through and then unmute them and, make sure they're not permanently muted. Next up, we had advertising names filter. This one just makes it so that if people had advertisements in their names, they will be muted, or you can kick them or ban them. I think kicking's a good idea. That's what I do on my server. Then we have unverified bot filter. If people try to invite their weird bot onto your server, then you can make it so that Wick will ban or kick them or whatever. In this case, if you click on the warning, it'll say this setting is a must-have. And it is true. Enable this because, like, I made a video a long time ago about how unverified or custom Discord bots can nuke your server, and that is still true to this day. So keep this option enabled and make it so that they get kicked or banned. And if you click on the little drop down here, it'll say, please do not mute them, because if you mute a bot on your server, they can still just DM members and be a huge pain in the rear. So make sure it's either kick or ban. And finally, we have the account age filter. Now, this basically is a filter that will make it so that new accounts cannot join your server. If you enable it, Wick will kick new accounts that are less than 7 days old. I'm going to make it so that it's less than 1 day old because there are some people who have like new accounts and they have to wait a couple days. All this fancy dancy stuff. But if someone wants to raid your server, you can make it less than a day old. Then you have this option underneath it that says make Wick show the minimum age required to join the server while DMing the person. Turn that off. And you might be thinking, why though? If you tell raiders how long their account needs to be made for before they can raid your server, then they'll just write it down on their calendar. But if they get banned for having a new account, that could be like, a month long wait or something. And they're already going to forget by then because YouTube's day and age, people don't have an attention span for more than 5 minutes. So just turn it off. And finally, you can kick, mute, or ban. I highly suggest doing kick or ban. I would just do kick, to be honest. Now, once you have these options set, click save. And let's go back to the dashboard, close the tab. And finally, the last option, verification. This basically is a CAPTCHA that people have to complete to join your server. So we're going to click configure, open in a new tab by middle mouse clicking it. Then we have all these options. I'm going to expand all categories. Then we have status for verification. I'm going to turn on verification. So once again, I'm turning on a CAPTCHA that people have to complete when they join my server. Turning it on, then the action is that I want Wick to quarantine all the accounts that fail the verification. So if they don't complete the CAPTCHA within a certain amount of time, they're going to be put in quarantine. Now this quarantine thing is also really cool because if you have a whole bunch of people in quarantine, you can actually just kick or ban all the accounts in quarantine. So it's really good for like raids and stuff. Now next up we have targets, and this basically sets up like who should you be giving a CAPTCHA to. In this case, I would leave it to all. And if a bot is added, add it instantly to quarantine and strip it of its power. So for example, Dino can't complete a CAPTCHA. So if you keep this enabled, it will strip all of its powers and add it to the quarantine so it can't raid your server. This is a good idea, keep it enabled. And it'll just tell you in both of these bombs, it'll say like, make sure that, pay attention to this stuff. Now, next up we have mode. So we have Wick CAPTCHA, Roo CAPTCHA, and Classic. There are some CAPTCHA bypassers as far as I know with like Discord raids and stuff. So you might need to swap it up. I would just leave it as Wick CAPTCHA for now. But if you're still getting raided with a verification thing, then you might want to change it to Roo CAPTCHA or Classic. Then in the duration tab, we can set how long someone has before they will get put into quarantine for failing the CAPTCHA. In this case, if you have a lot of computer illiterate people, set it to like 10 minutes or something. But if you have a lot of pro gamers, you can set it to 2 minutes. But basically, after 10 minutes, if someone doesn't complete the CAPTCHA, they will be put into quarantine. And the rest of this section is just all premium features. Don't worry about it. Just click save. And kaboom. That is all of Wick set up. Almost. We need to do the final thing I was talking about. Go back to your Discord server. Type in !setup. Press enter. And it'll say, welcome to Wick Setup. And it'll do a whole bunch of things. It's creating channels, mod logs, all this other stuff. It'll take some time. And once the setup is finished, we need to click on our server, click server settings, go to roles. Then we need to make it so that quarantine is above everyone, but underneath Wick. So it should be Wick, quarantine, then the rest of your roles. Then for muted, you want to put this underneath your moderator or your staff role, because you don't want to mute your staff, obviously. And once you do that, click Save Changes, and there you go. That's how you set up Wick. So since this video is already an eternity long, I'm not going to show you how to use every single WickBot command in terms of like moderation, but I'll show you how to figure it out for yourself, because it is pretty straightforward. There's going to be a link in the description that's going to have the Wick commands. You're going to see this window here. Now, what you just need to do is you just look through the commands and figure out how they work. So I'm going to walk through kick with you, then I'm going to run the kick command and just show you how it works. So if I click on kick, then it's going to tell me what it does. So this page explains Wick's kick command greatly. It's going to tell you the aliases. So instead of typing out kick, you could just do K. There's a description. There's permits. So this basically tells you like who can kick. In this case, it's going to be server owners and extra owners, the trusted admins that we didn't set beforehand. Then we have members with the admin role that we set in Wick and the moderator role. There's a preview, then there's the format. So it's going to be !kick. Then we pick the members, then we have parameters. Now this is really straightforward, the members part, but parameters is a little confusing. So that's why on the right, we're going to go to contents and click on parameters. And this is where we have different options that we can add. If we add $R and type in a reason after, we can add a reason to why we kicked them. We can also do $DM to DM the person why they got banned or kicked. Then we could do $P, which will send a compact response. And the examples of how to run these are on the right. So I am going to do that really quick. I'm going to run the kick command. So to run the command, I'm going to do the prefix, and the default prefix is !. Then I'm going to type out kick. Then I'm going to put in Wick. I want to kick Wick. Then I'm going to do $R for a reason. And I'm going to say too cool bot for me. Then I'm going to do $DM. I want Wick to be DM'd when he got kicked. Then I'm going to press enter, and it's going to say, oh, I can't do it. And it's because Wick is the bot that's trying to kick itself, so it's not going to work. But that is how you run a command. Once again, the commands in this kind of documentation, really straightforward, very easy to learn. It's just the main moderation commands that you and your staff will have to learn to use the bot effectively. If this video is confusing, just keep in mind Wick is a very powerful bot and there are a lot of things to go over. So if, obviously, oh, watch it again, ha ha ha, but spend some time with it. If things are confusing, once again, remember that documentation thing I pulled up? This is very, very, very in-depth. So if you're ever confused about anything, always just check this out because it's going to explain everything to you. It's just great. The documentation's really good. Regardless, let's say you do give up and you don't want Wick anymore. Once again, it's very straightforward. Right-click on Wick, kick Wick from your server, go to your server, click on server settings, go to roles, and just delete the Wick, the quarantine, and the muted role if you only have Wick as your moderation bot. If you have like Dino as well, then don't delete the muted role. Regardless, that's how to set up Wick and also how to remove it. I hope it was helpful. I love you very much, sweetheart. Mwah!